So welcome everyone. I am very excited to have Geoff Tooley join us to dispel the myth of the best case study. When I read the G20 Compendium of best practice and I saw Geoff's project in it, I was very surprised. And the reason I was very surprised is because there have been a number of very devastating floods in South Africa, in eThekwini, where Geoff has been working, that had resulted in people dying. You can see from the image on the screen, massive damage to infrastructure. And so I couldn't understand how a riverine management project that is not saving people's lives and infrastructure and nature and whatnot could be best practice. And so started a journey of asking a few questions from colleagues who were from Durban. And I said, what do you think? How can this possibly be best case? And they put me right. And I was like, actually, I need to chat to Geoff and get to the bottom of what it is that they've been working on. And I also just have to say that, and I probably should have started with that, when I saw the presentation that Geoff gave, gosh, Geoff, when was that? Probably 2020, I think it was COVID, with the benefit case.
Yes. The benefit cost analysis.
Thank you. I was green with envy because it was really such amazing work. And then all the floods happened and I was like, oh, maybe it wasn't such great work. So Geoff is going to take us through the work that he's been doing. And I'm very delighted by Ruth, who's joining from Nairobi, and Fatemeh, who's joining from Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. The connection isn't great in Iran, and we're just delighted to have you here. If you do manage to get some stable connection, hopefully you'll be able to ask some questions. The idea with the session is not that it's death by PowerPoint. We really want to have a conversation and test some ideas and really understand what it is that Geoff has been doing and why we should be excited about that. So Geoff, I think I'm going to hand over to you. If you can just take us through, give us a sense of the work that you've been doing. And then Ruth and Fatemeh and Jane and myself will ask you some questions and hopefully get the conversation going. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamsin. Thanks very much for having me here. And I want to just start by saying that this isn't just my work. This is a team effort. It was a team that came out of many different sectors. What was interesting is I believe it was a team that was started by Dr. Deborah Roberts through her work in, I always put it in terms of her work in identifying people from different sectors that could understand the narrative of the importance of the environment and how it connects us all. And it was out of that we were working with Mark Tomlinson, Joe Dowes, Sean O'Donoghue, a number of different people, Kumisa Tengwa, that came out of different sectors in the municipality. But one of the things that we had realized is that we were having challenges with a lot of our river crossings. And as you can see in this picture here, this is a river crossing and you can see the debris. And this is the typical debris that we were seeing blocking our culverts. And obviously when these block, we were seeing a lot of damage. And initially it was always the management of waste that was blaming the problem. That was blamed for the problem. And we started looking at the pictures. So this picture is from the 22 floods, but we're talking about pictures from previous floods where we were seeing damage, where we were asking the question, why are we seeing more damage? Is it all climate change related? Is there something else that's causing this problem? And it was through looking at these pictures that we started to notice, yes, there's waste in this picture. But if you look at the primary blockage that you see in this picture, it's vegetation. And so then the question was asked, why are we seeing more of this vegetation that is coming down? How come this is increasing? And then we started to look at our rivers differently, because ultimately our urban rivers are part of the stormwater system that drains the city. And the question was starting to ask, why are we not managing these spaces better? And so that's really where it started, we had 8 different sectors going to the same streams for different mandates. And we sort of pulled those people together and said, how can we do this better? We've got a city that's growing, the budget isn't growing, the staff members aren't growing, but we've got to find a way of dealing with this problem in a better way. And out of that came what we called the Sishlanzim Velo program. And that was really started with Mark Tomlinson's input. He ran the Zibambele program, which was employing indigenous households.
Can I interrupt very quickly?
Okay.
No, you're not. And Ruth and Fatemeh, please also, if there's something that you want to clarify, jump in. The 8 sectors, what were they?
So it was
about transversal approaches and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that question. Please stop me if I go down a rabbit hole. Yeah, I get excited about this project because it is part of my passion. So it was the solid waste people obviously involved, the parks and rec people, the stormwater management people, the stormwater infrastructure. So that was people that looked at flooding and infrastructure damage. There was the roads and stormwater maintenance people, the roads department, the environmental health people. So they would typically look for how healthy the rivers are from a vector point of view. So was there water standing? So mosquitoes, was there rubbish that was attracting rats, which bring disease as well? Then you had the environmental department that were looking at alien vegetation and biodiversity aspects. And then the sanitation people, so the sewerage guys, because typically our sewer systems are gravity, so they follow the river systems. And when you have damage to river banks, you invariably damage sewerage pipes that need repair, etc. So those were sort of the 8 departments that were going to these different rivers for different, as said, mandates. And Mark came up with the idea, why don't we look at, we looked at employing people like we do with Zibambele. And Mark came up with the idea of what about utilizing a co-op model? So the idea here is get people from the community that are unemployed, help them establish a co-op with constitution, a treasurer, proper management skills, business management skills and business skills. So they get trained, registered, and then utilize them as enterprises to do the management of the streams, as opposed to individuals looking after those streams. So that's really where it started. We went through a program from 2009 to 2011 of establishing these co-ops, training them up. The city then put out an expression of interest, 3-year expression of interest. Co-ops then registered on, and if they were correctly registered, correctly constituted, they then were placed on the expression of interest panel. Those were then trained in business skills, identifying alien vegetation, health and safety. So basic skills they needed to carry out the work. And then we identified streams that were in the worst condition and where there was the highest unemployment. And based on the budget that we had, we then chose 5-kilometer sections of river and stream that were
Geoff,
in these areas.
Before we get into the sections of stream, I'd like to ask Ruth and Fatemeh if they have any questions that they'd like to ask based on what you've just shared. I'm curious to know, I mean, Ruth, co-ops, I mean, Geoff, a co-op, what makes a co-op as opposed to a catchment management forum? Maybe you could describe what that is. So I'd be very curious to know if there are other models in Kenya, for example, that might be similar. Ruth, do you have any, Ruth, Fatemeh? Any questions at this stage? No? Okay, Geoff, go for it.
Ruth, I saw you unmuted.
I just wanted to ask if you can put more detail on that model that you said you employed so that you can use the members of the community to participate. How did you filter to know that these people will be of use to the project, and how are you going to distribute them within that area?
So the co-ops model is essentially, on most of the co-ops, it's about 8 members. So these were community members from that ward that were assisted in getting together and registering as a business. So as a co-op business. So they went through proper business registration, those processes, which required some training. But the principle behind it was that instead of employing individual people, that we would employ enterprises as a city. This is part of South African government drive to, rather than just creating employment, to develop SMMEs, because the more small businesses you can develop, the quicker you deal with unemployment issues. So that was along those lines that we set up the co-op. In terms of how we chose the co-ops, so what we did is we encouraged all co-ops to register on the expression of interest. That then goes onto a database. It's evolved now. It started originally just with the river cleaning. Now it's gone on where they put out an expression of interest, and there's a number of different sectors can be utilized: grass cutting, building cleaning, actual road cleaning in parts of the city, and then obviously the stream cleaning. So these co-ops are part of the expression of interest. They then get approached to take up a section of stream or river. These are the initial program. We wanted to do one stream, but through council advice and engagement, they requested us to share it amongst wards. So we're not doing full streams, we're doing sections of streams in different wards. And then the co-op that's employed to look after that stream is from that ward. So they live in that space. Part of the reasoning behind that is then they're not having to travel to work. They're walking to work it's close to where they live. They know the community that lives adjacent to it, if it's not themselves. So that's how the model has been set up and has worked fairly well. We had some initial hiccups in the beginning. We thought looking at where the co-op was registered, we thought they were in the ward. It turned out that the ward boundary was in the center of the road, and although they lived on the high side of the road, they didn't live next to the stream, and that stream was in a different ward. And so we had to go through a process of ensuring specifically they're not in the ward, because that created some political tensions. And understandable, because councillors want to talk about job creation that they've been involved in their wards. So that started, and it was going really well, and we started to see a lot of benefits. And we saw, which we recognized through one, obviously we were seeing an improved water quality, because part of the process that these co-ops do, and maybe I must just jump ahead, I'll come back to these pictures. So part of the things that the co-ops do, so these are some of the streams beforehand, and they are required to clean 3 meters either side of the water. They take out alien vegetation, solid waste, and they also report any sewer leaks. So any surcharging manholes or any broken sewers, they report, and then that goes through to the sanitation guys to go in and do the repairs or unblock the manhole, etc. So what we started seeing was an improved water quality. We started seeing, as you can see the pictures at the bottom there, you could go and have a picnic in these streams. These are township areas where you can look at the top left what those streams looked like before. There was broken glass, a lot of rubbish, therefore rats, therefore a lot of snakes. It was seen as an unhealthy place. The children didn't play there. They played on the street rather. It was seen as a waste place by these communities. It was unsafe. what we've seen then through the change is the community starting to say, hey, this is actually a valuable space. We're seeing children playing in this place now. We're seeing people taking ownership where they're actually starting to talk to their neighbors that are throwing rubbish in the stream and saying, please don't do that. As part of the community, we clean up that river and we're keeping it clean. They're then seeing an improvement in terms of they're not seeing the same blockage occurring on the culverts that we were seeing before. And one of the things that we started, so we saw these benefits, and it was a case of how do we need to capture these and start recording these from a value point of view. And that's where the C40 Cities Finance Facility came in, and they assisted us in doing a vulnerability analysis, gap analysis, actually valorizing the work that was being done to understand, to start proving the value in this approach.
So, Geoff, was there anything that surprised you in that process? I mean, doing these analyses, is that something that you do a lot of or had done a lot of previously, or was this something quite new and different? Because I know that with C40 and ICLEI and whatnot, there was a few years back, there was kind of proliferation of different ways of valuing these types of projects in a way that we hadn't really done before. Any reflections on it? Was it something new at the time? And was there anything that surprised you particularly having gone through the process?
Yeah, it's not something that we do. So typically as municipal employees, you're so stretched, you don't necessarily have the time to capture knowledge, learnings. You don't have time to start understanding what are the connections, what are the add-on value that you get. And often you don't have the knowledge. I mean, I learned a lot of how to set up a business case, how to do a cost benefit analysis, how to do a vulnerability and a gap analysis, and understand these, where you start to, one, pick up other values that you hadn't thought about, but also see opportunities where the gaps are, is how the program can grow into a place where you're now accessing other opportunities. So one of the things that have come out of this program is a waste beneficiation program. So a lot of the waste that we take out of the rivers is dirty. So the plastic that comes out, it costs money to clean it. So the normal recyclers don't necessarily want it. So then they started questioning, how can we utilize this? So out of that came some work that was funded by Economic Development Department, where they funded research into using dirty plastic in eco pavers, in various applications. So actually testing these things out. And then the other aspect was the alien vegetation we were taking out from a composting point of view, developing bokashi compost, an aerobic type compost that can then be sold. So the idea was, how could we take the waste products and then create something of value? So therefore you're taking away from the landfill sites. So now we're talking about saving airspace in the landfill. You're also talking about saving money in terms of the transport of this waste to landfill. So these are all the different connections that we started to see. And out of that valuation, I don't have the other, but essentially what came out of that, and this is just purely looking at avoided damage to the municipal culverts and the road crossings. So I want to stress that we looked at all the benefits. There were lots so that we saw, but we couldn't put values to all of them. So we decided to look at what we could put values to, and one that we had data for was damage to culverts over the years, what it meant to cost of that replacing those culverts. We then got an economist involved and looked at what were the impacts on communities where they lost that road crossing. They then had to travel further to get to work, school, etc. And out of that came we looked at the municipal and societal benefits purely related to those crossings that got damaged. And it came out that for every R1 we spent, we're saving between R1.80 and R3.40. straight away, having this type of data, we started talking then to the CFO, and because we were talking his language, he started saying, well, let's put more money towards it. And we doubled. We went from 200 odd kilometers to now, I showed that picture earlier where the city's doing just over 500 kilometers of stream within the city. It's a small portion, but it's a start, and we're getting a lot of the evidence from this work. And the biggest evidence that came in it was from the floods. So I want to go back to these pictures where this is a road crossing, and you can see the debris that's caught on this road crossing. And because the culvert blocked, the approaches got washed away. You can see that again, all of these pictures. This is an informal settlement, and this culvert here blocked here. There's a picture, and notice again that the vegetation, primary alien, the secondary blockage is the solid waste. And what happened is the water then, instead of going down through the river, actually jumped out the river and came through here. And so the impact on the infrastructure and the surrounding dwellings, the surrounding properties, is massive because of these blockages. So the problem is the alien vegetation is our primary problem that we recognized, and this is what's being addressed through the management program. And the main reason is the alien vegetation. It grows faster, shallow root system. It also crowds out the indigenous deeper rooted systems. It's easily pulled out during a flood event. Those exposed river banks, they get eroded quicker, so you get more silt. Your larger trees are undermined. That ends up in the river. That causes more blockage. And that's the primary blockage, and then the secondary is the solid blockage, and then you end up with overtopping. And that picture that I showed you in the beginning, this one here, this is a 4-meter deep canal, and you can actually see the silt that's been deposited here. So what happens twofold, you end up with this blockage of the culvert. So this picture is the blockage of that culvert, and we did an estimate on the actual flow. This culvert should have maybe overtopped for half an hour. It overtopped for 3 days. And as a result, we lost the road. We lost the services that were in that road. So that's cutting off electricity, water mains, telecommunication, not to mention the transport. This is a main transport route for business and people getting to work, scholars, etc. So what happens with the silt? This fills up the canal, and now you don't have the capacity in the canal, so therefore there's more chance of flooding. So those are the bigger problems that we had. And so what we did, and I want to go to this final slide, I asked the consultants that we utilize for Seychelles and Velo. So that consultant appointment includes them employing assessors out of the community. These assessors are trained to support the co-ops. They do monthly photographs at points upstream and downstream at specific points, which register then the state of the river, and the co-ops get paid on the level of cleanliness of that section of river. So it's a performance-based operation. And I asked them to go through and give me feedback on the areas that we are looking. And typical engineers, they came back with all the damages they could find. But there were 3 statements, and it was very interesting, where in Umlazi area, some areas were fortunate to have minor damage. Certain areas in the south were not massively affected. Areas in Newland were not massively affected. We saw a massive reduction in damage in the streams that we were managing. And what the floods did is they proved the business case in reality. And so we've now got the business case with the studies, the feedback from communities, the advocacy role that's getting played, all the additional benefits. Then we had the floods that actually proved it. And to the extent now that what it also did, it highlighted to business in our areas, in our communities, that looking after the rivers is one of the key factors of maintaining access for them as businesses. And so through the work we've done, and now through we've got the TRMP, so the Transformative River Management Program has essentially come out of this. And it's been called that. We don't want to call it Seychelles and Velo because there's a lot of different initiatives in our river space, both private and city initiatives. So the idea of the TRMP is to be all-encompassing, to bring in everybody into the TRMP because they all play a role. We've seen communities take ownership of areas where they've cleaned them out of aliens. They're reporting where the sewers are broken. This isn't city funded. This is community funded. We've got areas where businesses are saying now, how can we get involved where we will employ and implement the TRMP on these rivers that are in private land that are impacting us as businesses. So we're starting to see this gain momentum in terms of how they've seen the benefits on the ground on the areas that we were doing. Now they're starting to see the benefits of spending income in these areas to reap the benefits. I had one businessman, when we showed him the concept, he said, well, I'll have 2 kilometers of stream that border my property. He said, we'll report the sewer leaks quicker so they'll get fixed quicker. We'll have an area that my staff can use for lunch. They can go sit down there, and at lunch it'll be clean, safe to go into. I won't have people sitting in that bush watching my premises to come steal from me at night. That'll all add value to my property, which means the value of my property will go up. So he actually said to me, he said, I'm trying to find the negative. Yes, Fatemeh?
I think it's the moment that we are searching for, the moment that indicated a shift in thinking from gray infrastructure to green infrastructure, using nature-based solutions. Yes.
So that's an interesting thing, and that's come over time, and that's what we've seen. It's not something that happened where we were talking about it, but it's been a slow process. One, by the communities that are utilizing the space now, that are seeing, looking after an urban stream. And I want to stress that we call it an urban stream for a reason, because what it started to do is started to connect, to help people understand that urban stream performs, the first function is, in a flood event, is getting rid of the water. And so if you don't look after that, there's an impact on the community from a flood point of view. So they're starting to understand that it's not just the pipes in the ground or the culverts under the road that are part of this urban drainage system. The streams form an integral part to it. So just like we look after our culverts and our pipes, we should be looking after the streams. So that's the one. Then they've started to see, when it starts getting managed, and it now is a space that is clean, that is safe to go to, that some of the areas, when they've cleaned out the alien vegetation, they've actually started vegetable gardens. So we're now starting to see that's another added value that they're seeing at this space. So again, it's learning, how do we get the indigenous riparian trees back in so that you protect the riverbank, which also help to protect the vegetable gardens. So it's been a slow process with the communities, but once it's switched, it's been amazing, because the community's taken ownership of the space now, and they're saying, this is our space. That it's not a case of, the city must come and clean it. It's a case of, this is our space. This is a space that's valuable to us because it stops our houses being flooded. It's a place where the kids can play. We can grow vegetables in it. It's an additional space that adds value to our lives. Then, from a business point of view, yes.
Sorry, I'm worried that you're not going to finish your thought, though. I also wanted to ask. I read after, I can't remember which storm, that your sewage treatment works were very badly affected, and that there were leaks going into the groundwater. So there's almost, flooding is water, and they're different types of water, and they're all connected in one way or the other. So in fact, protecting and maintaining your river corridors will protect your sewage treatment works, which then protects your groundwater, which could be part of your, certainly in Cape Town, your water resilience plan. Would that thinking gel with your thoughts?
Yes, so that's another aspect that's come out. So typically the problems come in like we saw in the floods. When you have an erosion issue and a sewer gets into the river or gets broken, you end up with the pollution, obviously. For us as a coastal city, it impacts on coastal seawater quality, which is now impacting on tourism. So there's a whole linkage there in terms of the cost to the city. What we're seeing with where we are working is small pockets of erosion are identified early. Now, when that's identified, you can often control that through the use of initially planting. So getting riparian trees or riparian plants back into that space with a deeper root system can be your initial event. If it's slightly bigger than that, that can't necessarily be dealt with purely by nature solutions. Something like a gabion going in, but typically it's a fairly small intervention. When you end up with a big erosion and a sewer's been broken, you're now talking 100, 200 times the cost to now put in a gabion, a retention bank, erosion protection to basically be able to put the sewer back. So now we're talking about avoided costs to infrastructure against the embankment. That's not included in our cost benefit. We weren't confident enough in the numbers that we had in proving that, because it's a very dynamic space. So that's why I was talking about if you find a small erosion event occurring. Now remember, erosion is a natural process, so you're going to have erosion. The problem is in our urban streams, we're trying to keep the stream where it is, and we don't want it to move a bit, which typically would happen naturally. So we've got to artificially manage it. That's why, again, going back to calling it an urban stream is important. So the cost of planting riparian trees, what would that cost compared to putting in a 50-meter wall that's 4 meters high to support the soil, plus replace the pipe, plus put the soil back? We're talking magnitudes of order difference in cost. So the benefit of having a presence on the stream is that you identify these challenges earlier, when you can take steps early on to avoid and mitigate that possible damage. So yes, there's, as we saw in the floods, the damage to us. I don't know if we would have stopped the damage to the wastewater treatment works, because that was a function of the flood level. But we certainly would have reduced the impact of the erosion to the sewer pipes. Now, when you're talking about the sewer pipes take the sewage to the wastewater treatment works. If you've lost, in one section on the Msatazana, I think they lost nearly 5 kilometers of a 450 diameter sewer. Now that's not something you fix quickly. The other challenge is typically you can't put the sewer pipe back in the servitude because we're crossing private land, but you can't put it where the land still exists because you don't have a servitude there. So there's now all legal aspects that you've got to deal with. So it's this whole thing of mitigating the risk is actually way cheaper than fixing it afterwards. So this comes back to proving that a nature-based solution, looking after the environment, the drainage channel, the stream, actually, it's way cheaper for the city than fixing all the problems after every flood event. So that's where the sort of realization that started to come through, where now we're starting to see engineering departments saying, we can see in these areas where you are looking after the stream, it's way less damage. So how do we repeat this in other spaces?
Yeah. So Geoff, you're talking to a bunch of landscape architects, and when we briefed, we did talk about we did talk about this. At what, I mean, you referred to transversal management, these 8 sectors that come together, that have come together for the success of this project. You talked about the importance of champions like Deborah Roberts. I'm wondering, have you worked with any landscape architects? We're talking about planting trees and river restoration, etc. Did a single landscape architect participate in any of these processes? And I'm really hoping the answer is yes, because otherwise we're completely redundant because you're doing such a good job without us. So just putting it out there.
No, so the answer is yes. So again, this whole idea of pulling in knowledge from different sectors, because not a single person has all the knowledge. And that's one of the things, going back to what Deborah did, is she was very clever. She connected with people in different sectors, got them to understand the importance of nature and the environment, and then got us to spend time together to understand what other people did. One of the first things we did was the municipal adaptation plan for water and health. So we got the water and health guys together, and you got engineers saying, if we want to stop the water, we need to do rainwater harvesting. I'm going to use this as an example, rainwater harvesting. So then, because of climate change, scarcity of water, then the health guys were saying, if you're going to do that, you need to be careful, because if you don't set up your water harvesting correctly, and you're going to create good mosquito breeding places, if you have a rise in temperature, the malaria belt's going to move south, which means there's a good chance you're going to end up with increase in malaria opportunities in the Durban area. So that was an example of the more we engaged with different sectors, not that we learned all the details of those different sectors, but we learned some of the key aspects. So when we ended up with a challenge, we said, hey, we need to get a landscape architect or an environmental person or a health person or a water person involved in this, because there's going to be an impact here and they could add value. And one of the areas, and I know this is where we worked with a landscape architect very closely, is in a lot of our township areas, they were very poorly designed from a town planning point of view. There wasn't a lot of active open space that was allowed in those town planning layouts. When we started clearing the streams, and as you can see from these pictures, the community started. We went to one community and we said, this is what we're doing. We showed them pictures of what we were doing in other areas. Their first response is, that's a dangerous place. Put a pipe in, cover it up. That's what we want. We don't want the stream. Then we took them to space and they started to see that, understand it. Then it changed, and we, with the landscape architect, put together a sort of suite of options that this space could be used. And we started getting the community's input in terms of what were the options. In the one area, it was big enough they could put a small kickabout for the kids to which they could level and have a kickabout. There was another area was slightly bigger. They could level it, plant it up. The community could use it for functions, where they could put a tent up and they could use it for functions. There was areas identified where they could put in an artificial wetland, which again would help to improve water quality. But this was done in conjunction with the community. So they developed a landscape plan, which was workshopped with the community and then implemented and by the city. So it was it highlighted for us the need for that, connecting people with that open space. Now, this is obviously an active open space. In some of the other areas, they are passive open spaces. So there's definitely that. That's where I've seen the engagement really start to take the river management program from just stopping the culverts being blocked or reporting blocked sewers to now changing the space to a space that the community finds is valuable and wants to use and has ideas of how they could use it, and that interaction then allowed for the development of that space.
Okay, so we
And I
do have a
also,
role. I'm very relieved to hear
yeah,
that.
so
I thought we were
it
just
was quite
about to get
interesting.
ourselves out of our work.
So after the we had was the 22 floods. I've lost track of time. I was actually invited by the Landscape Architects Society here in KZN to actually present to them on the TRMP and what was being done and where we were looking, because as what's come out of what I've explained is every profession has a role to play in this space. And it was highlighted by the fact that we had 8 different departments going to the same stream. It starts to show you that there's these linkages, that this space pulls us all together. And one of Professor Kathy Sutherland, in one of the workshops that we were working at from UKZN, she made a statement is that the water connects us all. And it's so true. It doesn't matter whether it's a engineer or a environmentalist, a landscape architects, whether it's a poor area or a rich area, whether it's a business commercial area or an open space area, we are connected by the water that runs in that stream. And if we get it wrong in any one of those spaces, it affects all of us. And so therefore there's a need for everybody to play a role in finding the solutions. And that's another thing that I wanted to stress, is that we don't have all the answers. And this is what we've learned, what's been really exciting with CFF. They've supported Cape Town, they're supporting Mbombela, Drakenstein, we're now supporting the city of Joburg. So the knowledge, the learnings are being put together. If you go to the C40 Cities Finance Facility webpage, there's a lot of knowledge products in there. And every town that we've gone to, or every city that we've gone to, where they've implemented something, and in Cape Town it's called the Livable Waterways program, there's been new learnings. And that information is coming through. We're just starting a program with Umhlatuzi where they're looking at a river management program. And in that case, it's directly impacting their water supply, where the river flows into Lake Kubu. So out of all of these, we'll learn new things and add to the learning, so that as more streams come onto this program, there are knowledge products that can be built on, and we can see the returns quicker.
So Geoff,
you've muted yourself, Tamsin.
Geoff, I would like to ask, in the upstream
Yes, Ruth?
area, are there some mitigation measures that you did differently from the downstream areas? If so, could you please highlight them?
Okay, so that's something I didn't mention. So when we started with the co-ops, there's a safety concern. Obviously, health and safety is key too. So the areas that we're doing is typically where the normal stream is below knee depth. So in other words, you can actually wade in the stream. What is starting to happen now is there are some other programs like with Durban Green Corridors that are looking after the bigger rivers, where you now need bigger safety plans because you don't want people falling in and drowning. So most of the Seychelles and Velo work that you see is done in the upper reaches of the catchment. Where the challenges come in, and this is where now we're looking now, because of the momentum that's been gained through a lot of the work that's been happening around the country, there's attention has been achieved in terms of a provincial and national level. We've just heard that through SANBI, there's a Green Climate Fund money that they've got coming in, and they're going to be supporting the district municipality near Mbombela, and then one up in the Limpopo region. And so there's this, to me, that's really important, because our rivers cross municipal boundaries. So typically, if you've got a stream that's in a municipal boundary, you can control the whole stream. But when it goes out of your boundary, you don't have necessary control in another area. I know in Limpopo that even goes now out of countries. So there's a need that we share the benefits of what these programs are doing, both from a community benefit in terms of employment, etc., but also from an infrastructure benefit and an environmental benefit. So all of these different benefits, so that you're not trying to tell people they must do this. You're saying these are the benefits of this program. And typically when they see that, they start saying, well, how can we get involved? How can we learn? And that's what we're starting to see. And then now what's happening with the CFF is they're moving into the national program. And Shahid Solomon, who was the special project advisor to eThekwini when we did this work, unfortunately he passed away. He had a vision of setting up a national platform for river management programs. And Andrew MacDonald from Cape Town we've picked that back up. We've got that going. We found out that it looks like we've got some people that put their hands up to assist in the funding. And we've also got MISA have indicated that they will help with the secretariat role. So the idea is now to bring this into a national platform so that we can start influencing national policy in terms of rollout of this type of work. And one of the big things that we're talking about is we don't want to see another purely nature-based solutions grant fund. We've got all of these municipal grant funds that are going out. What we're saying is that there should be, in all the existing funds, we bring in a nature-based solutions aspect that cities need to actually show that the solutions they are implementing have a nature-based aspect. And so that's where we headed in terms of trying to influence national policy. And
so Geoff, you're talking about influencing everybody else. Now you've semi-retired, so you've been around the block a few times. I'm wondering who influenced you, because this is not a normal engineering approach that we're hearing. Some of your colleagues might say, engineers don't have much vision. You give them a problem and they solve it. That's not the way that you've been discussing your work here and your team's work. Who influenced you? So it's Deborah. This is.
So I mentioned Deborah.
Like it's been a journey that you've been on to get to this point.
Yeah, and I think that I touched on it by the fact that of engaging with other sectors. Okay, and I want to defend engineers because I have to defend engineers. So typically engineers are risk averse. So you've got your tried and tested grey infrastructure, and so an engineer will stick with what he's trained on. Where we're changing to in terms of working with our universities is bringing in nature-based solutions. Typically, we call it SUDS, so Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems, which is bringing in a lot of the nature-based solutions. There's a lot of work that's been done through the Water Research Commission and through a number of different projects looking at this. And what is starting to happen now is the suite of options are being tested in various places. And I've seen it in eThekwini where engineers are looking at that, like, we're not sure about putting in a swale next to a road, as opposed to putting a curb and channel and stormwater pipes and inlets. Now we've got Ushakela Highway that comes out of King Shaka Airport that goes north. That doesn't have curb and channels. That was done, the water flows off, it flows into a swale on either side of on the center medium and either side, down to a drainage point where it drops in. The grass gets cut as it would normally, the rubbish gets picked up, the water's flowing through vegetation, which is improving water quality that's ending up in our streams. And in actual fact, the project was cheaper because they didn't have to put the pipes in and all the inlets. So now what we've got, that's an example where you've got an actual project that's in. You can talk about it. An engineer that's got another road can say, well, who were the engineers on that Ushakela Highway? They can contact those engineers. They can say, how did it work? What challenges do you have? What must I watch out for? So now it's changing in terms of the types of practice that are accepted as normal. So the normal has been changed through this test. The universities have played a big role too in terms of doing tests on permeable pavements, on detention ponds, best practice in terms of that. We've had visits from the States of a professor that came and talked 10 years on some of the SUDS applications that they've done there, and some of the maladaptation that's come out of that. So I think in terms of my personal experience, I've always had a passion I'm a fly fisherman. I've always had a passion for rivers and being involved in those spaces from young. And I like to see a clean stream as much as anybody else. Linking that with the fact that now I've got a responsibility of designing infrastructure and ensuring that it's resilient in light of the storms we're having, possible climate impacts, all of those. So I've got grey infrastructure that I'm designing, but realized that by looking after the green infrastructure, I can protect my grey infrastructure and have a whole lot of other benefits that we can realize. And so now suddenly, when you're talking about what's the value here? That's been my journey, is starting to see the benefits of doing something different. And the more evidence we can collect, the more every flood is a good opportunity to collect good information and prove it to our colleagues.
So Geoff, I can see Ruth and Fatemeh both have unmuted, so I'm assuming they want to ask a question, but I'm going to jump in, and then Ruth, you jump in, and then Geoff can answer both of our questions. So Geoff, there was something that happened that made it possible for you to take semi-retirement, and that's also been an important part in this journey. We've had demonstration projects, we've had influencing colleagues, etc. What was that one thing that one piece of the puzzle that fell into place when you realized that your work was done and you could move on to more fly fishing and other exciting things? And Ruth, you can ask your question, then hopefully it ties in with my question, and Geoff can answer both together.
I wanted to ask, throughout your work, when was the one moment that was your most inspiring, and which moment was your let's say annoying moment throughout the project?
I'll start with the annoying project. The problem with working in government is you've got bureaucracy, and it creates challenges. And the biggest annoying thing for me was that when you've got bureaucrats in your supply chain management process. So the way the co-ops work is a 3-year contract, and that's in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act. So we have to re-advertise the expression of interest, and we had co-ops. We had gone through the process timeously to get the next expression of interest out, and we had SEM people that just didn't play ball, and we ended up with a situation where the existing contracts had come to an end and the new contracts weren't in place. And I basically used the international leverage that we'd got from CFF to go to the CFO and say, do you really want me to tell global stakeholders that the Seashells and Velo program that has been so successful is actually stopping because we've got a supply chain management problem because some people aren't efficient? And we managed to, they had to get month-by-month extensions, but there was a lot of pressure brought to bear to actually get it back on track. So that was part of a challenge. So it highlighted the fact you don't only bring the technical people along, it's also important to bring your support services along to understand the impacts of their inaction in terms of how it can mess up good programs. The highlight, I think, was the flood. As much as it was devastating, was going to those areas where we were managing it and engaging with the community, where they were telling me that because of the river management program, their houses hadn't been flooded. And I think that for me was just the ultimate confirmation that we were doing the right thing. Yeah. So it was the hands-on or the light bulb moment that this is we're doing right. Now I want to go back to what was the thing that meant I could leave. Well, it wasn't actually. There were two things that one was a frustration. So part of the challenge that we have is that 21% of our city is municipal owned land. The streams are on municipal owned land, and typically that's where the city can easily spend municipal funds. 23% is municipal, 26% is privately owned, and 51% is in tribal authority land. So there are problems in terms of spending money in those areas. There are ways of doing it, but it can be limiting and a lot of hurdles to jump through, or hoops to jump through. But the biggest problem is the mistrust because of the corruption that we've seen in our government over the last number of years. There's a total mistrust between business and private sector in the city and the tribal authorities in the city. So what was happening, I was trying to engage business, I was trying to engage tribal authorities, and I was having to get over this mistrust hurdle, which I didn't succeed very well in. Small advances, but very, very slow. And so that was a big frustration for me. And I recognized that if I got out of the city and away from that connection, I could engage freer with both the tribal authorities and the businesses. So that was the one side of things. The other thing was I didn't want to leave until we had got the TRMP to a point that it was properly institutionalized and established. So I didn't want to be in a situation where I was one of the team that was driving this. I then stepped away and we saw this model collapse, as we've seen many things like that happen when the drivers start to leave. Jo Dowes, who was part of the team, she had left 2 years before. Just recently, Sean O'Donoghue has gone to Canada with his wife. She's originally from Canada. So Gary Cullen from Economic Development had got to retirement age. Mark Tomlinson is heading towards retirement age. So the drivers, we didn't want to lose this really good project. And so in October 24, we got working with the city manager, with the chief strategy officer. We finally got a post in the chief strategy officer's office, which now meant the manager, TRMP, is now sitting in that CSO's office, which means there's convening power. It's not stuck in one department. It's at a high enough level that there's convening power. To the extent now that the TRMP is the number one priority in the city's resilient program. So that was, we needed to get that in place before I could step out. And now that I've stepped out, I then got asked by GIZ to get involved with Umhlathuze and George, and I'm now assisting CFF on the city of Joburg, on the Yixgay, and ultimately starting to get involved in the national platform. But I've been engaging with business, and it's been amazing to meet business where I can engage from out of the city. There's far less mistrust. They're far quicker to listen and hear what I have to say. And then what I'm able to do is now connect them with Russell, who's the manager in the CSO's office. So I'm seeing that as a benefit. I have had some attraction in the tribal authority areas. And in actual fact, some of the work we're doing now with Umhlathuze is in one of the tribal authorities. So that's going to be another space that I'll be able to engage with, get some of the learnings out of that space. Even already some of the engagements, I'm realizing a lot of the indigenous knowledge still exists in our tribal authorities. The benefits of a wetland, the need to protect it are all there, but it hasn't been elevated enough in terms of processes on the ground. So that's where I'm at. So I hope I've explained. It wasn't a case of wanting to go do more fly fishing. My wife says she sees less of me now, and I'm probably doing less fly fishing. but I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and it's really, if we can make a difference and we can help more cities, and we can get this into a national program, then, and now that we're getting GCF involved through DFFE and with Sanbi in Mbombela and in Limpopo, there's a possibility of accessing bigger funds, because we'll start to see examples of projects that have been beneficial.
Yeah. So Geoff, thank you so much for demonstrating the complexity that we work in. It's not just about the drawings, it's about the relationships, it's about the institutions, it's about the funding. I'm going to ask Ruth and then Fatemeh to ask their last questions before we wrap up. So Ruth, over to you, and then Fatemeh, over to you.
Okay, we have some questions from some of the participants. So we have Chris, who is asking, which evidence did you use to make sure that the type of the NbS solution that you chose was a perfect fit for this case? That's and then the second question he's asking is, which type of NbS did you implement and in which regions? That's from Chris. I don't have any other question. Maybe you can answer that. Let me wrap up.
Before we hand back to Geoff,
Fatemeh?
is there a question? Yeah.
If you had to convey one key message about the role of landscape architects to the world, what would it be?
I got some of that question. Tamsin, did you hear the question?
I didn't hear it well. Fatemeh, can you give it another go?
Shall I say what I heard, and then you can correct me? So if I had opportunity to tell a landscape architect what could they do differently to improve this thing, what would that be? Is that?
If you have to convey one key message about the role of landscape architects to the world, what would it be?
Okay, so the role of landscape architects is, okay, I'll start with that question. That's a tough one. So for me, the role of a landscape architect is bringing the engineer together with the community in this space to develop a solution that meets the needs of the community and meets the engineering needs. And that's been my lesson. So that's, to me, the role. And what I learned out of that process, and I'll give an example. In some of the areas, the stream was between the property was very narrow. In other areas, it was a lot wider. And so what the landscape architect did, they started by saying, well, what were the needs and where could those needs be met? And then in the different spaces within that corridor. And then it was a case of, okay, so what is that going to look like physically? And then it was, once those first things were established and there was buy-in by the community, where the landscape architect was able to show various pictures of what different spaces would look like. And there was a decision made. It was then a case of sitting and saying, well, okay, from an engineering point of view, how do we utilize that space to make sure that the drainage part works? I hope I've explained that. So it's that connection that is made. And then the other thing is, which I never understand, I never know whether it's a landscape architect or whether there's a environmental biologist or a botanist that is deciding on the plants. So there's also that role in terms of what are you going to use it for, and are there options in terms of planting that can be beneficial? So, I mean, one of the things that we were playing around with was vetiver grass, which is not indigenous to Durban, but it's a World Bank has spent a lot of money in terms of investigating the uses of that, but it's a very deep-rooted grass. So engaging with the guys and saying, well, could we use this, or are there local products or local plants that can do it? And then would that work from the landscape planning point of view as well? So I hope I answered your question there, Fatemeh. And then evidence of a perfect fit of nature-based solutions. And then what did we implement? So I think there were a couple of things. Obviously, the removal of the alien vegetation was a big, that was one of the primary objectives. The idea of reducing the biomass that was available to go down the river and block the culverts. That was a big aspect. One of the things, and you can see from this picture, is they're only doing 3 meters either side of the stream. So part of the program that's being looked at the moment is how do we set it up so that we actually widen it? Because you've got a seed bank either side that's putting seed back into that space continuously, not only from the upstream areas but on either side of the stream. So how do we expand it? How do we manage that? So that's being worked on at the moment. As with any program, you'll be careful how you change it. You can't change it too quickly. So that's been looked at. And then the other aspect that is being brought in, which I don't have a picture of now, we've done it on some of the projects. There's a Trepreneur program that was set up during the 2010 World Cup as part of the carbon offset, where they were replanting sugarcane fields with coastal forest vegetation there. They taught communities how to harvest riparian seeds, grow them to a certain size. They don't get paid cash, they get paid in vouchers, which they can use for school fees, building materials, clothing, etc. And so that program now, that Trepreneur program, is another community-based program that exists. And so what we're looking at, what the city's looking at now, is how do we link this program with the Trepreneur program, where we're removing the alien vegetation, we bring in the riparian trees back in, and the co-ops look after those, plant them, grow them, and you're then starting to change it purely from a alien infested place to where it's just all being cut back and cleared, to now a proper riparian zone that runs down on either side of the river. So that's now another way of linking in the community programs to which uplift the communities, but at the same time we uplifting our space, which now talks to improve biodiversity and all of those aspects. So those are the, I don't know if I've answered that question about so the evidence for me has been the fact that we've got areas where the rivers were managed, we saw less damage to our infrastructure. I know it's an engineering focus, but I must say, having spoken to the communities, and if you go speak to the communities that live on these rivers, this is now their space. This is not a city space. This is a community space that they own and they look after. And because they understand the benefits, safe place for their children to play, safe from a flooding risk, improved water quality because the sewers are being reported and they've been fixed a lot quicker. So it's now an amenity space for that community, which they didn't have before.
Awesome. Folks, we are 10 minutes over. It's been 10 minutes worthwhile, though. I think that last point, and I'm not sure that our international participants recognize the importance of what you've just described, and that sense of ownership. You know, in a country like South Africa, where we had apartheid, Black South Africans were not welcome in cities. They were not encouraged to feel a sense of ownership. To have kind of turned that corner and to be able to reflect now on communities feeling a sense of ownership is amazing. It's a real achievement. Geoff, you are a treasure, a national treasure, not just an eThekwini treasure. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Ruth and Fatemeh, thank you so much for joining us as well. I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are if you've had a chance to read the review that we wrote. When you do, if you do, let us know what your thoughts are, because this is our first attempt at starting to have conversations about case studies and best practice, etc. And you've definitely set us off galloping, which is really, really great. And just for those of you who are on the call, the intention is to turn this recording into a podcast so that we can disseminate it even further, and hopefully people will be listening to Geoff sharing his learnings on the way to work, assuming that we're all able to drive in the next months. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening further, or day. I'm not sure wherever you're joining from. And yes, I mean, keep an eye out on LinkedIn and on the socials for that podcast when we eventually manage to pull it together. Fatemeh, Ruth, I don't know if you want to have one last word before we close. No? Okay. Okay, super. Geoff, one last comment from you.
For sharing experience.
Cool.
Sorry, Fatemeh?
Thank you for sharing this experience with us and our audience.
It's my pleasure. The more people we convert to looking after our river systems, the better.
The better. Ruth, any last comments? Okay. Well, Ruth, there we go.
Sorry, I was on mute. We continue highlighting the case studies that are amplifying our work as landscape architects, no matter the stage. That's all.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruth. And Geoff, you get the last word.
No, thank you very much for having me. And I just want to stress again, this is not me. I'm part of a team that's growing around the country and internationally. We also shared this work with Mombasa and with Dar es Salaam. So there's work that's going into other parts of the country. So the more we can make a difference also in Mozambique, and get the story out, because we all have the same challenges. And if we can make our cities more resilient, then everybody benefits. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And everyone, not sure when we're going to have our next webinar / podcast, but hopefully it won't be in the too distant future. Chat soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.